in Malaysia, USA, and UK, United Kingdom. Mr. Shiv is constantly on the lookout for ways to empower, educate, to empower and educate individuals, organizations, and society. Mr. Shiv has recently run online awareness section on the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda 2022 initiative via the Giant versus Titan Challenge platform, of which I happen to be one of us participants also, and I won a prize during that program. Thank you very much, sir. And then his programs here, the program he specializes on are Agenda 2023 and environmental awareness for the workforce, acts of powerful presentation, and then also from coal to diamond, value creation in the workplace, then organizational cultural change and business psychological programs, and many more to mention. Please, Mr. Shiv, you can unmute yourself while you take over. Thank you very much, sir.
Right. Thank you so much, Jose. Apologies if that was long, because I sent you something which I said, you can just keep it short. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. And so I'm going to just share my slides if I can. Let me share screen. And okay, right. So do you see the slideshow, Jose, and everyone?
Yes, sir, we can see it. Go on, sir.
Okay, great. So I'm here to talk about the international organizations, the roles of international organizations in combating climate change. I'm told I've got about 15 minutes, right? 10 to 15 minutes? Let me know when I need to stop.
You have 20 minutes. You have 20 minutes, sir.
Okay, right, yeah. So actually this topic is something that, I do a lot of awareness, but in particular of international organizations, it's something I don't normally get involved in studying international organizations. But of course, I Googled it up and there are some articles there. So I've basically got, in a sense, two parts of this presentation. And the first part is about an article I read online. The second part is my input, okay? So, but before I go there, exactly 6 years ago, this thing just popped up, something I shared on Facebook, okay? You can see here, this was in 2017. A 16-year-old walked up to the microphone during the US Supreme Court hearing, and he said, the state of the planet is unraveling around us because of our addiction to fossil fuels. For the last several decades, we have been neglecting the fact that this is the only planet we have, and the main stakeholders in this issue are the younger generation, So I believe, I'm probably 3 times the age of some of you here. So to carry on, not only are the youth going to be inheriting every problem that we see in the world after the politicians and after the older people leave, but their voices have been neglected from the conversation. So that's why it's really important, because we can see climate action and climate change is really affecting the entire planet. And so as I mentioned, part 1, I will refer to this article by Ainat El-Azhari. You can also Google it. That was last year in April. And part 2 is my inputs, okay, to the roles of international organizations combating climate change. So coming to the article, she basically says, without the guidance provided by international organizations, the failure to achieve global and local climate goals, such as the reduction of greenhouse gases, will become common. So international organizations are really important, because in every country, we do not have big organizations. Maybe the developed countries, they have, the NGOs are well equipped, they got all the information. But in smaller countries, they do not have information and infrastructure to act. Therefore, this is where we need international organizations. So she says the international organization must function as a lighthouse of information. Okay, so you know lighthouses, right? The ships come to the dangerous parts and they need guidance. So this is where international organizations, they need to give guidance. So like lighthouses of information. So you can see international organizations need to share research-based knowledge and provision of recommendations. Only if an organization, international organization, they only can have so much funds, and therefore the knowledge that they come up will be really researched and valid. Okay, if you have small organizations like me, for instance, I'm a solo entrepreneur. I might just get some information here, information there. It's not researched. It might not be the right input or right facts. You see, so it's important then that international organizations research and give us good information. Second role, international organizations need to also monitor progress of all different stakeholders in their the state of where they are at. Okay, so collection of analysis of data. So they got to get all this from the governments and put it all together to see whether we are on track. So that's the next thing, monitor national progress. Moving on, then they also need to facilitate collaborations between the state and non-state actors. Now this is important because many times without an international organization, everyone does their own thing, and they may be very good at doing something great, but it may not be great for the rest of the world or the rest of the planet. So it's important that they do it in such a way that it's done right. And also you see you can see that the two parts, state and non-state actors. So state is like perhaps the central government in a country, the cabinet, but they can only do so much. They can come up with policies. But every country has also got non-state actors. So organizations like myself, where I do awareness, like Ms. Nava here, all of us are doing something, okay? And because of international organizations, UNDP and the Sustainable Development Goals, we can all come together. And therefore, we'll have more people acting concertedly, so we can collaborate better. And what do international organizations aim for? What should we aim for? They should aim to provide quality research. Again, I can't underpin this enough. It's important that all the data that comes is verified from many sources, and that's why a lot of money is needed to get the team that can verify this. There's only international organizations like the United Nations, and there are many others, WHO and whatnot. Only they can do it. And when they do it, it's important that they give the right information, the quality research. Secondly, any international organization needs to be apolitical. Apolitical means they should not play politics. They are there for a reason. We got to talk about climate change. So climate change, okay, greenhouse gases affected. Petroleum, fossil fuels can provide a lot of exit. So when we go to an OPEC country who manufacture a lot of fossil-based fuels, we cannot butter the bread. Okay, we should actually tell them as it is. So they should be apolitical. Thirdly, they should be collaboration enablers. So you can see these are the three things that international organizations should aim to do. At this point, any questions, anyone? Otherwise, I'll continue. All good so far?
When you're done, sir, I think they'll ask their question.
Okay, right. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is kind of something that Ms. Aina El-Azhari printed. Okay, the flow chart, the international organizations, this is where they are. So local authorities, so small authorities like me, so they can provide a network for all the local authorities so that we can all collaborate together. At the same time, they give data to countries and they collect data as well. Okay, so this is important. And finally, they make sure that the state as well gives support to local authorities, gives right laws, make sure that everyone follows the law, and we also collect data back from them. So essentially, this is kind of the ecosystem of how the international organization that's helping climate change should function. So as mentioned now, that was the part of the article that I got, the roles of international organizations. Feel free to Google it, or I can give you the link to that article later as well. Now, at this point, I'd like to give my inputs, my thoughts on this matter. And so that is something that I started, the SDG targets. If we look at this, the Sustainable Development Goals and Targets, okay? So there are 17 targets. I've actually created this where you can Google and see what all the 17 goals and all the targets there are. There are 169 targets, and we can search by keywords. So I'm going to click this, and let's put awareness, AWARENESS, and let me search for awareness. So 2 targets found. So you can see target 12.8, which has got to do with responsible consumption and production, to promote universal understanding of sustainable lifestyles. So it's about creating awareness about responsible consumption and production. And then you see climate action tour, goal number 13, the third target, target 13.3, to build knowledge and capacity to meet climate change. So it's very clear that all the countries and all the international organizations, building awareness is important. So you can see here, improve education, raise awareness, and human and institutional capacity to climate mitigate change. So on this basis, I kind of want to go to my input. I'm going to take now a non-climate action issue. If you see COVID-19, this struck us about 3 years ago. The global response was too slow and leadership was absent. So this report in 2021, I believe, 13th May, it actually studied, okay? And what they said is, no, we could have done better. The COVID-19 pandemic was a preventable disaster with weak links at every point in the chain of preparedness and response, according to a high-level panel review. So for me, this is all about the international organization not doing its job in quite a big way. For example, when the pandemic and the news came out first, the organization involved, it's now clear that they were actually being a little political. They were not apolitical, okay? The country that was involved, they were like pussyfooting and they're saying, hey, don't tell them, don't tell the world yet, don't tell the world yet. And because of that delay, people were allowed to leave the other country, and it spread to the world. So that was important. So this is an example where there was apolitical, the organization was not apolitical. I'm not going to name which organization and which country, but you can find out yourself. Okay, right. So my take is international organizations need to speak up. What do they need to do? They need to speak up, speak up, speak up. Okay, my take is international organizations are not speaking up enough. They should speak about the elephant in the room. What do you mean by the elephant in the room? You've heard of the saying elephant in the room. Elephant in the room is something where people are uncomfortable to say, okay? It's because they feel they will upset somebody. But ladies and gentlemen, climate inaction, and if you look at the state of the global natural disasters, it's really, really very high now. And for too long, I think our international organizations have not been speaking up. They've been keeping quiet about things that are really important to us. And as a result, it's business as usual. People are still consuming all the items that are contributing to climate disasters. So it's important that they start speaking up. So if you look at it, elephants in the room. So organizations that are reluctant to speak up, that deny that something exists, ignorance, avoidance, they keep quiet because it's awkward to speak up about it. Okay, silence and all. So I think a very good example is, of course, petroleum, fossil fuels. As we consume them, the more and more we consume, we burn. There's more carbon that we put into the atmosphere, and as a result of that, we're getting higher climates and therefore more natural calamities. I really think people, international organizations, need to speak up about the root causes. What's the root cause of climate, global warming, for instance? So once they go to the root cause, and then they also need to actually tell the facts that it is. This is something I kind of found out. We are losing about 10 football fields of forest cover every minute. A soccer field, like 120 meters by whatever, 100 meters by 50 meters, and every minute we're losing 10 soccer fields, and this is going on every day of the year, 24 hours, 3,600 minutes or whatever in a day. And do you know that livestock, if you look at all the mammals, the weight of mammals on planet Earth, you divide them into 3 categories of mammals. So wild animals in the jungles, okay, in the natural forest, like elephants, tigers, lions in the jungles. Then we have human beings, okay, that you and me and all of this. And then livestock. Livestock are the things that we raise in farms, like cattle, mammals, so cattle, mutton, goats and pigs and whatnot. Livestock make up 62% of the world's mammals. Human beings, 34%. And only 4% are mammals. Now, what is this about? Actually, the problem is this: livestock. The more and more livestock that we have, our demand for meat consumption, that means we have to cut down more forests to grow soya beans and corn that we need to feed the cattle and the pigs. And as a result, the wild animals will actually suffer. And the more forests we cut down, there is less absorption of carbon dioxide, and therefore we get a global problem. So in my book, international organizations urgently need to step up and promote awareness of the possible consequences of inaction. Okay, so that's something they need to do. Like I said, target 12.8, target 13.3. We got to do more to educate people. We got to act urgently. So raise awareness, step up the level of urgency. Only when we have a critical mass of concerned citizens, voters, only then will our policymakers and politicians really act. Right now, we don't have the critical mass. Everyone is just concerned about their daily bread, and therefore they are forgetting about the young children, the things that they will face in the coming years. So Giants versus Titans is a program that I kind of initiated, and the bottom line of Giants versus Titans is doing awareness talks on sustainable development goals and whatnot. So you can actually go to www.gbtla and join us in doing our bit to raise awareness. So this is something that I really love doing, and we do quizzes, we do all kinds of challenges, talks as well, and now we can do it online. And I'm looking forward to collaborate with people worldwide. We want to do this. We have to step up, otherwise it's not going to be good for the children in the future. In fact, even for me in my old age, it's not going to be very good. So we need to do more to make this a better planet. With that, I'd like to say thank you. My contact is there. And I'd like to open the floor if there are any questions. Over to you, Jose.
Thank you, sir, for your professionalism, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. We really do appreciate, sir. Back to the audience. I don't know, please, if any of you have a question to ask, then you can raise your hand. And there's an emoji, or there's a this thing that signifies you raise your hand. Just go to the option. There's an emoji there that says raise hand. So you can raise your hand up if you have any question, please. Please, the audience, you have a question. We're waiting for you to ask your question.
Okay, no problem. There's no questions. I'm always available later if anybody wants to, text me or you can forward to me as well. I'm happy to give answers. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time here.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Chief. Thank you for giving in your time and your effort. We really do appreciate, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. And coming up next, for those who just joined, I am Hope Hosea, the Zamfara State Representative for the CAAP program, which is a Climate Actor Accelerators program, the sponsorship of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solution Network. And I am your moderator for today. And the theme for this webinar is the roles of citizens, governments, international organizations, and civil society organizations in combating climate change. Now we're calling up our second speaker, who is a person of Ms. Naventa S. Nats. She is the founder of Together for Good. Nava is a social entrepreneur and a community builder from Singapore. She has a passion for the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals using an intersectional lens and believes in the power she believes in the power of collective efforts, collective change and building a better world. And Ms. Nava, she is deeply committed to promoting mental well-being and women's empowerment and creating opportunities for youth through her ventures and supporting other organizations with a similar alignment in mission. Nava, please, if you're here, can you just take over or mute yourself, please? Thank you. And sorry, Ms. Nava will be taking us on the roles of citizens and government in combating climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Hope. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. I'm sorry that I can't switch on my camera because it might crash my Zoom. But you can look at the slides. I'll be sharing on the role of governments and citizens in combating climate change. Now, a little bit about myself. I know that I shared a few things. I'm the founder of Together for Good, which is a collective that seeks a more capable, conscious, and compassionate society. Now, I'll also be sharing about some of the sustainable development goals, right? And personally, these are the ones that I advocate for, which is good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and I've also put climate action in there. And the reason for that is because, all of these they're very much interconnected. And without, the environment being good, you can't even look at having quality education because it will be very disruptive to schools and things like that. Right. So when we talk about the SDGs, it's very important to look at it from a very holistic place and that all of these goals are very intersectional and related. Now, when we talk about the impact of climate change, of course, something that we need to look at is that climate change, with adverse climate change, we're looking at catastrophic impact on lived environments, and the failure to tackle these threats will, of course, worsen health and social inequalities, and more people will be pushed into extreme poverty, right? So we're also looking at the depletion of natural resources, more frequent and intense droughts, and extreme weather events. And we are already seeing the implications of this in our world today. And before I continue, can I just ask that all of you mute yourselves while speaking so it's not as disruptive? Thank you so much. Now, when we talk about the role of the government, right, what is the role of the government in combating climate change? For example, so I've listed out some of the things over here, but governments can choose from a wide range of policy interventions and financing measures to support the transformation of energy and industrial systems, improve energy efficiency, tackle environmental pollution, and protect and replenish natural capital. There's also governments who can impose green taxes on harmful environmental activities and also inculcate tighter regulations and new environmental standards and certifications for energy performance, emissions, and pollutants, and also include tax rebates for meeting these standards. We also see many examples of how loans and grants for green investments in sustainable agriculture, renewable or low carbon energy sources, and efficient buildings, and public walkways. And for some governments, they also invest in electric vehicle infrastructure. Now, subsidies and tax rebates are also good examples of additional tools that boost demand for green products and services, right? So in some cases, this looks like examples of electric vehicles, solar panels, and renewable energies. Now, governments can also offer subsidies and grant funding, which is very important to invest in research institutes, academic institutions, and private R&D firms to boost innovation and develop transformative technologies. So what are some factors already preventing governments from realizing their sustainability ambitions? Right, so these are some examples of this. And what we've seen is that in the 2020 Sustainability Leaders Survey from GlobeScan, it concluded that national governments lack leadership on sustainable development. Some examples stated include, political short-termism, which is where governments may work on their political cycles, and so they might have a shorter-term view. And there might also be economic pressures and industry lobbying, where governments might have pressure to preserve established carbon-intensive industries. We see this with airlines, manufacturing sectors, and they are more strategically important because they account for a significant share of jobs and GDP. So making that shift from such industries might also be very difficult for some governments. Right, so some of these other factors are listed out here. If you would like to deep dive into it, we can go into this later on. When we talk about having a more sustainable future, the actions governments take now could set the world on a path to a more sustainable future that balances environmental, economic, and social outcomes. So here are some examples of this, right? One very important part of that, of course, is providing a very detailed action plan with clear accountability. And we need to see more of this in governments. And setting that action plan also sets in place what businesses need to do or what individuals can do. Another example, of course, is about boosting innovation through increasing funding, because what we're doing today isn't enough. So how can we then invest in newer technologies and newer ways of producing? And most importantly, in the part that I would like to highlight is promoting a whole of society and people-centered approach. Now, the reason for this is, citizens have a crucial role to play in tackling climate and environmental problems by changing their behavior and informing policymakers of their views. And at the end of the day, right, when we talk about systemic change, systems are also made of people, right? So that's where change can also happen. And so the next segment of the presentation will focus on individual action. Now, I'm going to ask you a very quick question on what is an example of what you think active citizen means, right? What do you think an active citizen means? So if you want, you can leave it in the chat very quickly. Yeah, so just to cover that a little bit, right? Because when we talk about active citizenry, many people associate active citizenry to volunteering or very big things like being an activist. But at the end of the day, being an active citizen also starts from very random things like random acts of kindness, right? From the very small step of helping your neighbor to pursuing your own education and staying informed and volunteering. These things also drive active citizenry. Now, at Together for Good, that was shared earlier, we're looking at creating a more conscious, capable, and compassionate society. We're currently establishing our pillars in mental well-being and DEIB. And when we talk about compassion, right, this is the aspect I want to cover, which is, what are the three aspects of compassion? We look at how we can notice, feel, and act. And these three aspects can also be applied in our 3 A's for youth action, which is having awareness, actively engaging, and advocating. And the value of compassion is also very much needed in protecting our environments and wanting to do more for our climate and environment. Now, what are some examples of youth action in the 3 A's? This is what we'll be deep diving into now. When we look at awareness, we look at the 4 main components, right? So earlier I shared a little bit about how even learning and educating yourself is also a part of being an active citizen. So learning is a very important part of that. Now, how can you go about learning, right? So of course, other than the very formal way of going through schools, there's also informal learning and formal learning through organizations and different platforms. So to support yourself through your journey, you can look for organizations with structured programs. So for myself, I actually went through this program with CAAP, which is a local organization in Singapore that caters to youth initiatives. And there was a program to create more content, right? So if you are an environmental activist, for example, and you would like to do more advocacy campaigns, right? So you can look out for organizations that have programs to develop your content creation and support you in that journey. I was also part of World Pulse, which is a digital platform for storytelling. And I was part of the Changemakers Lab, where anyone who identifies as a woman, we were part of this, and we were given a structured program over 6 months to do more for our ground up initiatives. So being a part of such programs, it feels a lot less lonely in your journey as you're advocating or if you're learning, right? To be part of a group and to support one another. You can also look out for existing platforms, right? The good thing about today's world, if you are able to join Zoom today, or if you're watching the video on YouTube, right, you can also access the internet, which means that you can access other platforms that provide these skills and opportunities for you to learn. Examples of like free courses include places like LinkedIn, edX, Udemy, Coursera, and so on. Right, so look out for what are platforms that already exist for you to be able to learn. Now, beyond self-learning, we can also look out for opportunities to learn from someone else. And a mentorship is a good way to do that, right? So there's informal and formal mentorship. And formal mentorships can include things like programs that provide the support and resources. There might be a fixed duration. It could be one-to-one or group mentorship. But it's a good avenue to learn from somebody else. And then many other benefits of mentorship in itself, right? An example of that would be accessing information, gaining soft skills like communication, better identifying what you're good at, and leveraging on that. So you can look at a local level, right? In your own country, in your own communities, what are some of these mentorship opportunities? These are some examples in Singapore at a local level. Additionally, you can also look out at a regional level, right? Close to your country, what are some other countries' programs that are also open to you? So this is one that I joined at a regional level by WeDo that looks at empowering more women leaders. And they also have programs for climate leaders as well. Now, if you are not sure of where you can look out for mentors, you can also, again, look at existing platforms like LinkedIn, right? And look at reaching out to people. So if you search out maybe people in environmental justice groups or climate groups, right? Or who might already have green jobs, whether they're consultants or engineers, you can reach out to them and learn from them, and even send them and just start by sending them a message, right? To let them know of your intention that you're looking out for a mentor. And when you're looking out for mentorship, also remember to provide mutual value. And that can be as simple as, liking their comments, sharing resources with them and things like that. We then move on to our second A, which is to actively engage, right? So volunteering is a very good way of doing that. Now, when we look at global trends, 1 billion people volunteer worldwide. And out of that, 70% of volunteer work is actually informal. So it might not even be a part of a program. And a lot of volunteers are actually more likely to also find work than non-volunteers, which also showcases that, there is value to volunteering because it's also a good way to add value to your skill sets. Now, when it comes to volunteering, we're also seeing shifting trends in having more ad hoc volunteers, right? So this is where, the volunteers are doing more course-based work. They might come in for a day or 2 days or for short-term project-related work. And it's a good way to figure out whether the organization's a right fit for you, whether your values align with the organization and you like doing the work that you've been assigned. And it's by doing ad hoc volunteering, you're also likely to then find something that you like and stay on in the organization longer, right? So some examples of long-term volunteering is that it's usually time-based. And over time, you may also give back with your skills. And an example of this is the Global Youth Forum, which is based in Kenya. So Global Youth Forum also looks at environmental projects. So if it's something that you're looking out for, you know, do Google it, do Google Global Youth Forum and join the team. Now, in terms of like volunteering examples, again, you know, there are many organizations that are looking for volunteers. Here are some examples. You can look out for them, and the UN Volunteers is an example where you can register and give your profile, and you might be matched when there's the right opportunity that comes up. And then we go into, you know, after volunteering, you know, what is something else that you could do, right? If there's something that you're really passionate about, you can also start your initiatives. But instead of being unsupported, right, try to look out for programs or ecosystems that already exist where you can leverage on the support that is available to scale your initiatives, right? So an example of this was that in Singapore, there was the Youth Action Challenge by the National Youth Council, where youth can look at different initiatives that they're passionate about. So for myself, I was very passionate about mental well-being, so I took part in that particular pillar. But there was also the sustainability pillar with more than 100 youth were a part of, and they were able to launch the initiatives and scale them. And then we come down to our last A, which looks at advocacy, right? So once you have actively engaged, you know, what else can you do? This is where it's very important to, one, support existing organizations and causes, because there are many organizations that exist, right? So you don't have to start a cause at every avenue. You can also look at supporting existing ones. Additionally, you know, look at how you can identify a cause that you feel strongly about and use tools to amplify these causes, right? So what are some of the tools that you can use? So something as simple as Instagram or YouTube or LinkedIn or TikTok, right? Are simple digital tools and platforms that exist that you can use from your smartphone to amplify the causes that you are passionate about. So for myself, I joined the TikTok Youth for Good program last year, where we were amplifying digital and mental wellness, right? So look out for programs, look out for tools and platforms that exist that enable you to do what you like and want to do. And to sum it up, these are the 3 A's. These are awareness, to actively engage, and to advocate, right? So this is what individuals, or especially youth, you can do to amplify the impact of climate change and mitigating climate change. And with that, thank you very much, Hope, for having me here today. If you have any other questions, you know, you can feel free to put it in the chat, or you can also connect with me and continue the conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Nava, for sharing from your wealth of knowledge with us. We really appreciate your efforts and your presentation. Thank you very much. Please, the audience participants, do you have questions? Do you have question contribution, please? Can you all hear me? Hello, I don't know. Can you all hear?
Okay, hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Please, is there a question? Yeah. Time for question. Okay. Please, you can ask your question now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Good afternoon. Actually, this is very interesting webinar. Actually, I came late. I was actually interested in the climate change topic that Mr. Shiv, right, talked about, but I came late, and I had wanted to make a little contribution, but unfortunately, it seems he has left. But again, I want to say, based on this topic, in the youth action, I think in Nigeria, to be precise, you know, we have we're not having a robust youth action challenge, just like she was talking about Singapore. But I think with this topic, with our submission, I think I'm beginning to feel that we're not doing enough in Nigeria when it comes to youth action and all that. But anyway, maybe in the course of our webinar, I'll be able to say one or two things again. So please, maybe someone can say his own submissions. Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Sorry, please, we're with you.
Okay.
We're with you.
Okay.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Yes,
All
thank
right.
you for your contribution. We really do appreciate. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Please, is there anyone here who has question? Please, we need questions. Our speaker cannot just present and then there will not be question. Does that mean we've not learned anything? Or if you have question or contribution, you can please ask, and then you can still contribute. Thank you.
Well, Adamu, thank you so much for your sharing about needing more youth action. I also love to hear, if there are any existing programs that exist that you've heard of in your own community. Feel free to put it in the chat, and maybe others can also check it out, right, and get more involved. Thank you.
You're welcome. Right now, the Climate Actor Accelerators Program cohort is going on 36 states, including FCT. Where actors are being sent out to the various states to carry out a community-based project, of which we were able to do ours yesterday. There was we had a community-based project yesterday in Zamfara state in Nigeria, where we were able to sensitize some communities. We were able to sensitize some communities on water purification, environmental sanitation, and hygiene situations. And then we had like 1,000 plus youth, women, and children, men who also participated in the sensitization program. And then a lot of surveys, a lot of what to be done was also observed there. And we have so many sponsors and so many supports from other organizations and other society. And then the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, they've done a wonderful work by sending in actors in all the 36 states, including FCT Abuja. So I think this will go a long way by enlightening the community, enlightening the country, enlightening everybody on how we all will come together to combat against climate change in our society and country at large. Thank you, Nava. I see there are more questions in the comment section. Please, sir, can you unmute your mic and ask your question, please? There's a question in the comment section. Please unmute your mic and ask your question, please. Nava, I think there's a question. What's Erife being made by concerned world leaders to check emissions from aircraft across the globe? Hello, Nava.
Hi, yeah, I'm reading the question. So I see a couple of questions from Bala, who has mentioned about, what efforts are being made by world leaders to check emissions from aircrafts, as well as about vehicles, right? About vehicles on land and in air doing harm to the climate, right? So when we think about emissions, right, we have to think of it as a whole, and what are the alternatives that are available, right? So I can't speak for any one country because I think different countries have different approaches to this. But some examples that we've seen, and I think in the very initial part of my sharing, I've shared about how there is some transition towards looking at electric vehicles. They're looking at alternative energy sources, right? And so again, this depends on each country and the measures that they're going with. But again, it takes a whole of society approach because, for example, if you want electric vehicles, we also have to ensure that that change is made affordable. Additionally, there's also additional infrastructure that comes in place with having electric vehicles, right? That also need to concurrently happen. So there also needs to be sufficient infrastructural changes that happen with that. So there are a couple of things that need to happen. There are some changes that are happening. I think for this particular discussion, we're looking at having that just transition. When we're having that green transition, how can we make it more easy to transit towards that, right? So I think there are many examples of things that are happening. It's just whether it is happening fast enough or not, and what is the commitment from global leaders and leaders of each country in making it happen in a very local level.
Okay, Nava, are you done? Hello, Nava.
Hi, yeah, I think to also end that off in terms of what is the way out. When you think about an individual level, we can also think about our consumption patterns as well, right? If we're going to change the way that we consume and we consume less like products and things like that, it would reduce manufacturing needs of these things, and again that would reduce then the number of like vehicles that are out there, distributing things for the supply chain, right? And so then that would reduce carbon emissions. So on an individual level, at least, we can rethink our consumption patterns, and that's what we can do. And then additionally, we can also highlight where changes need to be made to our local leaders. Yeah. Thanks, Hope.
Okay. Thank you, Nava. I think our third speaker is supposed to come up to handle the last section for the webinar, but I think he's not available because of one or two things kept him from joining. He lost someone. So I would like to share more on for the benefits of others and audience and other participants who some those who are just joining us, while some have joined.
Can I say one? Can I ask a question?
Okay, please, you can ask.
Okay, sorry. Another, I want to say that we in Africa are at the receiving end of this climate change because the industrialized countries, who are emitting all this pollution, carbon, I think it affects Africa more, because we are less industrialized. So you find that even we can't even predict our rainfall, we can't even, there's desert encroachments, what have you. And in fact, it has caused so many crises, headers, farmers clashes in West Africa, precisely like Nigeria, So I don't know what the industrialized countries are doing to assist Africa, to assist us in reducing, mitigating the climate change. Because whatever we do here, I don't think we're going to make any change. I don't think we're going to effect any change because the pollution comes from the West. It comes from the industrialized countries. So I think we have less to do rather than just maybe we'll just try and see how we can just be stripping it. But we can't just stop it. We can just, it will continue to what do you call, to encroach. And aside the encroachment, the insecurity that comes with it, because we have headers who are looking for water, and it gets dry up, in the Sahel and all that, So and they continue to have. So we have a very, very serious crisis on our hands, especially in West Africa. So do you have any idea on what the industrialized countries are doing to help Africa or to reduce, to mitigate the climate change?
Yeah, thank you for your question. May I just know what is your name, by the way, because it didn't show up on my screen.
Okay, my name is Dr. Baba Ransom.
All right. Thank you so much for your question. Very well shared about how there is that disproportionate impact of climate change that's happening. And then, it goes back to why that is happening to begin with, right? So when we think about development, when it was happening in the past, right, we saw a lot of extraction happening as well. And so a lot of these countries that face that level of extraction might now be at the receiving end of a disproportionate amount of climate effects. And even within certain countries, we can see how geographically, there are differences between maybe urban or rural communities when, adverse impact of climate is happening, right? So those are things that we do need to address. And governments definitely need to look at. And so when we look at, solutions, it also needs to bring into the picture in the forefront that history as well as that disparity, right? And addressing that in the solutions that are available. So yeah, I don't think that any country can potentially only look at sorry, I think when countries look at the solutions, we do need to look at society as a whole, and think about how we can better collaborate, right, across regions, whether it's through knowledge sharing. An example of that with Africa as well is that there's so many indigenous communities and agricultural practices that have been scientifically proven to be beneficial to the environment, right? And that knowledge in itself is very worthy of so much. So, how can we share that, right? How can we also inculcate practices in agriculture to ensure that these jobs are also safe? Because at the end of the day, all of our food systems are also very much interconnected, right? So when we're looking at development in the future, green solutions need to be very much a part of that. But we also need to look at various societies and how we're all very much interconnected, right? So the conversation still needs to include various governments, right? Various organizations. I think Shiv very well put how international organizations can work together. So no one body can be excluded from that conversation, right? And so we all need to work together to ensure that all of us can progress together. Yeah.
Thank you, Nava. I think there are more questions popping up. I can see. Please, Nava, can you go to the group, to the chat box and then check the questions? I think we have so many questions coming up, please. Someone is asking, what are the benefits and solutions of climate change? I think, let me take in. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, one, I would like to talk about the solutions to climate change. How can we avoid climate change? One, we have to keep our homes cozy. We have to keep our surroundings clean. We have to keep our homes safe. We have to keep our homes healthy. That is one aspect that we can be able to fight against climate change. And two, we have to invest in renewable energy, solar energy and solar power and all of that. We have to invest in renewable energy. And then three, we have to keep our fossil fuels in the ground. Like we know, planting of tree is very essential, and that is why they will be encouraged to plant trees, because the smoke coming out from the firewood, from the gas, from our charcoal and everything we burn, it goes up to the sky, and then this causes effects on our climate change. And that's why it said that we should keep fossil fuel in the ground. Then we have to improve our farming, and then we have to encourage vegan diets. planting of vegetables, grains, fruits. We'll consume more of that. And then we'll have to protect our forests, just like the Amazon. The less fossil fuel we use, and then the less effect, the less impact it has on our climate change. And then through that, it can help to protect our Amazon. I cannot do it alone. You cannot do it alone. It has to be all of us that will have to join our hands to combat against climate change. And that is why the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, they've pulled out that they've sent in all actors in the whole 36 states plus FCT to sensitize, to carry out a webinar section, a school education section, and then sensitization section. That's a community-based project. Some actors have done tree planting, and we were able to sensitize our community on purification of water, environmental sanitation, and then hygiene situations. So all of these can help us in combating climate change. And then I can see more questions. Nava, please, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. I'm looking at the questions.
Okay. I think there's a question. Yes.
Yeah. So I think A.E. Mary mentioned about avoiding deforestation and making greater efforts. Yeah. And very well said, Hope. So thanks for sharing what you're sharing on the possible solutions. I think, to look at it from this lens of, there are very big things that need to happen, right? About protecting the forest, like protecting the oceans, switching to renewable energy. It sounds like very big things that need to happen, which it is. But if you want to also be very hopeful about what individuals can do in that, right? To break it down to the smallest parts, is that, each of the things that we do does make a difference, right? So even individuals, by signaling changes with your consumption patterns, you're also signaling changes that are needed, that can influence businesses, it can influence your local governments, and that's how change happens, right? So don't forget the power that each and every one of us have in protecting our environment and also signaling the changes that are needed for these bigger changes to then happen.
Okay. I think Nusaiba, do you have a question? I can see you raising your hand, or you want to make a contribution. Is she there, please? Okay, before going to the next topic, I would like
so let me ask her.
Okay.
Okay. So, Ms. Nava, I would like to know, how do you experience climate change in your home country, Singapore?
Well, thank you for that question. Oh, that's a good question. So I live in a very urban environment, right? And so I think it also comes with a lot of privilege to be living there, because, when, of course, it gets very hot, for example, what we do is to then, take respite and rest in an air-conditioned environment, right? And I know that that's not the privilege that everyone has. And I get to see that on a day-to-day level, because, we have, say, our workers on the streets or building our buildings, or, restoring our roads, right? And they're doing that work under the hot sun, right? So not everyone gets to take shelter from the greater heat that we're experiencing in Singapore. So the last few years, especially towards like April to June, we keep hearing it in the news and seeing it in the news as to how these months are now facing record temperatures every year, right? And so that's one way that we're experiencing climate change happening. The other is that we're also seeing greater rain that we have not experienced in many years happening over our last decade in itself. And some examples of the effects of that has been, certain parts of the roads flooding. So there's some homes that have experienced flooding. Some of our waterways that have been built were not built for the kind of rain that we're currently experiencing in the recent years. And so in terms of the urban development, planning and things like that, all of that has also had to shift and account for climate change in recent years, right? So that's an example of that. And then when we talk about food systems, I think COVID has also definitely exacerbated the problem where we saw, countries shutting out their exports and imports, right? Or the exports to different countries. So Singapore is a very small island state. It's only about 42 to 45 kilometers across. So we're very dependent on a lot of our imports from other countries because we don't have a lot of land to build our own food and even our own water, right? So we're very dependent on others. Of course, there has been technology that has been used to ensure that we have greater resources in terms of water and food on our own. But with COVID, what we've seen is that we've also needed to look at diversifying our imports. And with climate change happening, it also means that not everything that we grow on our land is going to grow well, right? So we're still going to be dependent on some of these food systems elsewhere. So that's definitely some of the impacts that we're seeing in Singapore in itself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Nava, and thank you, Mr. Baba, for your questions. I can see a question. Someone asked a question. Let me go down to the question. Does climate change have effects on Africa, and what's the effect, please? Yes, climate change has effect on Africa, and that is why we are asking and we are pleading with people to come out, let's combat climate change. If it doesn't have effect on Africa, I think then there's no point for any sensitization program. There's no point on enlightening people the effect, the causes, and how to avoid climate change. Okay. Talking of the effects of climate change, if you notice, warmer temperature over time are changing. The warmer temperature over time has changed and they're still changing. Then weather patterns and disrupting the weather patterns, they are disrupting our usual balance of nature. If you notice, the sun is becoming more hotter by the day. By this time, we're supposed to experience like rainfall, have too much rainfall, but if you notice, the rain hardly falls. Maybe once in a while you just see it, and it's just and the rain will just fall a bit, and you can even count how many times rain has fallen or rain has fell. Sorry, you can count. So these are the effects of the climate change on Africa, and then this poses that many risks to human being and other forms of life on Earth. And climate change, with all this weather changing, because this climate change is a long-time shift. It's a long-time shift, and then it's not something that has started today. It has been in existence. It's natural, and then the man-made. We also have a part. We have a part to play, and then we have also played, and we're still playing parts in increasing the effects of this climate change. And then, if you notice, we have hotter temperature now. There are more severe storms. Like the changes in temperature, it causes changes in rainfall, just like I have said. The result is more severe, and the frequent storms, they also cause flooding, destroying homes and communities. If you see in some states, Kogi and the rest of them, that we have flood and of everything. And then we had, and it has we through the flood, and lives were lost, properties were destroyed, and so many, and so on and so forth. Then increased drought, rainfall, water is becoming more scarce by the day, and in more regions, you see people struggling for water and all of that. And this leads to destructive sands and dust storms. Then deserts are expanding by the day, reducing life for growing of food. We can't, if we don't come out to fight against or combat climate change, I think maybe in years to come, we will not have where to be able to grow our food, because already the effects will be much on us, and by then it will be too hard for us to start fighting against it. And that's why the United Nations Sustainable Development Solution Network that was created in 2022, they have to say, okay, we want to push this forward. Let's make people, youth, old, young, everybody, let's come together to combat climate change. And that is why we're having this section, we're having this program, and this program is still going to continue. So all these are the effects of climate change. Thank you. I think we'll have more questions in the comments section. Nava, please, you have any contribution?
Yes, I just added into the chat about another example of climate change for Singapore, right? Which is that, with it being a very small island state, something that's very important, of course, is the rise in sea level is very concerning because it would be very catastrophic for the country. And so Singapore leaders are very involved in efforts to, of course, mitigate rising sea levels. Right, so that's something that's also being looked at. One example of that is that, even being an equatorial country, our leaders are also on certain groups related to the Arctic Circle and the mountain ice. And the reason for that, of course, is that, the rise in sea levels anywhere would affect us as a country. So even though we are an equatorial country, we are involved in such efforts.
Okay, thank you, Nava. Do you have any more questions? We have a few minutes left to round up the section.
Okay,
Please, do you have
I
any
think,
question?
hello?
Okay.
Okay, I think the government have to be sincere and have to be serious in mitigating the effects of climate change, because like in Nigeria, we still experience gas flaring. In most of these our refineries, you see the gas flaring, and again, when I believe also in the industrialized countries like Singapore, you still find what do you call industries flaring their pollution. That's the what do you call the flaring of their carbon, because I don't think if the to what you hide it, put it under the ground share in mitigating what you call the effects of climate change. But I think climate change and air pollution, that's what you call, think of climate change. I think of how do you expect China or India or America to forgone their forgone their flaring, like their industries. How will they do that? So I think, wow, it's really, really going to be a tedious task for the world. Yes. So that's what I just want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baba, for your wonderful contribution. We really do appreciate your efforts. Do we have any more person to contribute towards this before we go down to the third section? Do we have anybody to contribute?
Sorry, I would love to contribute something.
Okay.
I would love to add to what Ms. Pope just said concerning the climate change and the effects it's on our planet. I think it goes way beyond the government. It's kind of like a collective responsibility for every individual on the planet, because without us combating this issue, it will have lots of effects on the entire planet as a whole. So we have to play our individual part, like we did during the weekend. That we went to sensitize a particular community on the effects of good hygiene and the effects of climate change, the way it have on our community and the planet as a whole. So I think it's something that we all have to come together and put our hands together, and because we have to put it like we have to make sure that we do our individual parts in this. So that's it.
Can you all hear me?
Yes, Hope, we can hear you.
Okay, I think the time is fast ahead of us, and I'll be taking the roles of civil society organization in combating climate change. We have one in my findings in the research I made. I got civil society. They play an important role in pushing for new laws, programs, policies, or strategy on climate change. These are civil society organizations. These are organizations that push. They play a key role in combating climate change in our society. Down here in Zamfara State, we have so many civil society organizations who who volunteered in taking part in our community, who took part in our community-based project yesterday. They were all interested, and we are all pushing forward on sensitizing the public on the causes, the effects of climate change on our planet, and also sensitizing them how we can put our hands together to restore our ecosystem. I think governments alone cannot do this, so they need the help of non-governmental organizations. They also need the help of civil society organization in raising environmental awareness around the globe, just like the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network are currently doing. So these are the key roles of the civil society organizations in combating climate change. And we also have the help of civil society organization. They help in so many so many programs apart from the climate change. And these people are people who are not waiting to be funded. They are self-made, they are already made, and theirs is to help the community, help the world in fighting and in restoring our ecosystem. Then the civil society organization, they also play multiple roles. They are important. These people, they are important source of information for both the citizens and the government. Then they monitor government policies and action, and they hold government accountable. They engage in advocacy and other alternative they engage in they engage in advocacies, just like I have said, and they offer alternative policies for government, the private sectors, and other institutions. According to my findings, I got to know that yes, civil society, they are engaged in advocacy, just like the UNSDSN are currently doing this advocacy program on combating climate change. And that's why we brought up the topic on the roles of citizens, the roles of governments, and also the roles of non-governmental organization and civil society organization in combating climate change. After sitting down to see that, okay, we cannot do it on our own, you cannot do it on our own, it has to be a collective effort in combating climate change. And then we said, okay, this team, I think, is an interesting team, and it should be brought out to the public so that we all can know that we all should know that it's not the responsibility of one person, it's not the responsibility of an individual, or it's not the responsibility of just a civil society or a non-governmental organization to be able to push this bill forward. And it has to be a collective effort in fighting, in combating against the effects. And it is our role to sensitize, to educate the public on the effects, on the components, on how to sensitize them on solutions to combat climate change. Without doing this, I think we'll all fold our hands, and by the and at the end of the day, it will be a problem. It will be a far cry for all of us, not just the Western world alone. It will have greater effects on the underdeveloped country, that is the third world countries. And that is why we're raising the sensitization program, this section, the webinar section, the climate education section, to go to schools, to go to villages, to go to communities, to go to different states in order to sensitize the community, in order to sensitize everybody, in order to let everybody know this is what is happening with our ecosystem, and this is how we can join hands to restore our ecosystem. So these are the key roles that the non and the civil society organizations are playing in advocacy, pushing of bills, pushing of new laws, program policies, strategies on climate change, raising awareness, sensitizing the public, making them to know the effects, and then looking for a way forward. And then the civil society organization, the non-governmental organization, the government, they came out with a way forward, and they said, if we don't sensitize, if we don't educate the public on climate change, this thing is something that has been in existence, and then our efforts, your efforts, my efforts, we also have contributed have contributed to the problem of this climate change. I think my time is almost over, and then I don't know, Nava, please, we'll be rounding up this section by 4:30. Do you have any contribution? Do you have any question? If you have any question, Nava, if you have contribution, please.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I think my main takeaway for anyone here is just, to remember the 3 A's, which is to, how can you get awareness, actively engage, and advocate for change. And I think a couple of people have mentioned about collective action. So yes, do remember, there's a lot of power in individuals driving change, and we should not underestimate the power of collective action.
Okay, thank you, Nava. I think because of our time, and then we have another state who are having their webinar by 4:30. We'll be rounding this section now. Please, do you have any more question? Okay, I would like to appreciate our guest speakers. Nava, thank you very much. Out of your busy schedule, you still took out your time to come and teach us, to come and share from your wealth of knowledge with us on how to combat climate change. Mr. Sheep, who has gone, who's not here with us, he left because he has another engagement. And then the audience, the participants, I want to say thank you very, very much for your time, for coming to listen and also to learn from what our guest speakers have said. And please, I'm urging every one of us to stand on our toe, to also join hands together in combating climate change. We can start in our homes, in our communities, and then anywhere you think you can carry out a sensitization program that yes, the message will be passed across to the public, and then the world at large. I would like to encourage every one of you to please take up the challenge, and then let's save and restore our ecosystem. I would like to appreciate the organizers, the United Nations Sustainable Development Solution Network, for giving us this wonderful opportunity and sensitizing our public and then the audience on the effects of climate change in our environment. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you, Nava. Thank you, everybody. God bless you all.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you.